Hi, everybody. You are watching School Psych Podcast. We're so happy to have you here this evening. We're excited for our guest, and I know that she has some cool little prizes and freebies tonight. So it might be a good idea to be commenting in the chat box so that to get your name kind of up in there, maybe might win something exciting. So I'll look forward to that. But my name is Rachel. I'm a school psychologist in the state of Maryland. I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca to tell everybody how to participate tonight. Rebecca?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca. I'm a school psychologist working in the state of Connecticut. And I hope that if you are watching us live, you have signed into your YouTube account because you can comment right alongside the video. We'll be looking for comments and questions and just hellos. And also you can comment on Facebook on either of the two pages, School Psych to Your School Psychologist or the School Psych podcast page, our dedicated podcast page, and on Twitter using the hashtag Psyched Podcast. Look for us at Podcast Psyched. We'll be looking for your tweets and comments and messages. And now I'm going to hand it over to Eric, who's going to introduce our wonderful guest.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. Well, I'm Eric, and I'm also a school psychologist in Connecticut, and I'm excited to have our other Rebecca with us tonight. Rebecca Branstetter, Ph.D., is a school psychologist, author, and speaker whose mission is to help children thrive by supporting school psychologists, educators, and families. She's the founder of the Thriving School Psychologist Collective, an online community dedicated to improving mental health and learning supports in public schools, as well as the co-creator of Make It Stick Parenting and Peace of Mind Parenting courses to support parents and families. She's the author of 2 books, The School Psychologist Survival Guide, and her newest book, which has just recently been released, The Thriving School Psychologist, 4 Steps to Better Time Management, Lower Stress, and More Impact in Your School Community Beyond Testing. She and her husband are proud parents to 2 daughters and 2 furry husky dogs and live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Well, welcome, Rebecca. I think tonight would be amazing to talk about your new book and many of your endeavors, and especially about the 4 common burnout traps that you've mentioned that school psychs can fall into. I'm wondering, maybe as we get started, if we could just hear a little bit about your journey as a school psychologist and what has led you to be interested in burnout and helping school psychologists thrive.
Well, I'm so excited to be here with, I don't know who's going to be called the other Rebecca, but my good friend Rebecca and Rachel and Eric. I'm so honored to be on this fabulous podcast. And like you mentioned, my new book just was released and literally this morning. So we just had that time change and I was up, and it wasn't because of the time change. I was excited to see it was coming out. So I'm very excited to share some of the key points and kind of key take-home messages from the new book. And it is, again, about moving from just survival mode into thriving. And, it kind of has started a journey of me search, me search turned research about what it is about the field of school psychology that makes us so prone to burnout, not just helping professionals in general, which also prone to burnout, but school psychologists in particular. And it all kind of came from this sort of moment in my life. It was about 8 years in to the field. And I was working very hard, and I was also pregnant with my first daughter. And so I was about 6 months pregnant or so, and I was in a situation where I was doing a ton of testing. And I felt really like my entire role was test, IEP, repeat, diagnose, and adios, right? Like I didn't feel really empowered to do all of the range of skills that I knew how to do and wanted to do. I just felt really trapped. And so one night I went to the district office, which is like from central casting of like the worst place on earth that you could think of, with like, metal desks and like filing cabinets and flickering like, fluorescent lights of horror, a window this big, like way up high that looks like jail. And so I went there because I was like, I'm 6 months pregnant. I got to figure out how to write these reports, and it's quiet there. So after work, after a full day at my middle school, I went on over there and I'm typing up my reports, and the whole building goes on lockdown for an intruder on campus, an armed intruder. So I dive under the desk, I'm clutching my belly, and I'm, kind of just being like, what am I doing? I had this moment where I was like, wait, why am I risking my life, my baby's life, for writing reports, like that's not what I signed up for. It's one thing, to be involved in your community and feel like you're really empowering, making a difference. But I felt like I was a paralegal, like a clerical aide at some point. And I'm sure school psychs out there might be resonating with that. And so on the way home, I'm, crying, and everyone was fine, thankfully. And, the gunman was caught and all that. But on the way home, I got to my husband. I was like, guess what? I have to quit my job. Like, I love my students and I hate what I am doing right now. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to pay the bill, like, hormones too, right? And so, in a weird way that life works, that week I got a call from Josie Bass Publishers, and they're like, we love your blog and we want you to write a book called The School Psychologist Survival Guide. And I was like, well, that's ironic because I seriously am like typing up my letter of resignation right now. And I ended up not quitting. Woo, here I am. And I ended up diving into the research on burnout prevention. What is it that helps you feel empowered in your role as a school psychologist? How can you get more efficient? Organizational hacks. How can you be more productive without, ruining every weekend? How can you, practice self-care? How can you do all of those practical things that are really necessary? So I dove into the research, and I also interviewed veteran school psychologists who had been in the field 30 plus years. One of them was like 41 years. And I was like, how, why? Like, I was so interested in what kept them going. And that really went into my first book, The School Psychologist Survival Guide, and helped me turn the corner on that one of those first pivotal moments of burnout. So if you've been in grad school, you might know it. So that's kind of my journey on how I started out really being interested in the burnout prevention research. It was me search.
It's so cool because I probably got started myself, like right when that first book came out, and I found your Facebook page, and it was just so exciting to know that, oh my gosh, school psychologists are on Facebook, and there's this book, and there's these forms, and there's all these strategies. And I was really excited to find that when I was first getting started. So we really appreciate that you hung in there. That sounds like a very harrowing, sort of turning point. And I think maybe many of us have less harrowing, but similar experiences where you just have this moment where you're like, oh my gosh, can I do this for the long term? And it can be really stressful and overwhelming. And if you don't have that meaningful connection with kids, really is why I think most of us got into this business. It can be really overwhelming. So thank you for all of that work. And we're so glad that it led to what you're doing now. And so did you find the experience of writing that first book and connecting with other school psychologists, was that also a way to stave off burnout, or did that help you feel like you were finding more meaning in the work?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that, and it actually, you've segued into one of the burnout traps. So spoiler alert, burnout trap number 3 is feeling isolated, feeling like you're alone on an island of suffering. And no one gets it, and no one at your school, and your principal, you've been there 8 years, and they're like, here's our counselor. You're like, seriously? Like, I'm not the counselor. And so it's really hard because unlike teachers who can just go down the hall and have a nice little consult, right? You can't do that in most schools. If you have another school psychologist in a building, you're lucky. I've always felt like when I saw another school psychologist, it was at a staff meeting, right? And it was like first person since the apocalypse moment. I'm like, there's another one. Like, I was so excited. And then we ended up talking about policy, and we didn't really have that time to connect. So I started my blog when it was like what was called Blogspot, which is like the first blogs, right? And I joined Facebook, and it was helpful to hear that I wasn't the only one. I wasn't on an island of suffering. There was other people who had that similar experience. So it wasn't me. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't fast enough, smart enough, organized enough, strategic enough, that there were real systemic challenges that across the country were quite similar among school psychologists.
For sure. And I think that that's inspiring that from that, you were able to, this kind of happenstance, this thing happened with the phone call and the publishers, and you're able to kind of take that and use your creativity, and, that something so good comes from that. So it's awesome. It's inspiring too. And I know that there's some psychs out there listening and watching right now that are like, oh my gosh, that's where I'm at right now. So I think that this is a good kind of pick me up for them to, maybe do something a little bit different or, buy the book and get some direction going on. So,
and I think I also
totally
felt at the time a real lack of professional development that meant something to me. It was all very interesting, but didn't really apply to what I was doing. And in fact, on my blog, I had one of the best contests I've ever had, which, will be trumped by this one. This one will be an amazing contest that we're going to have today. But it was, what is the worst professional development you've ever been to? Okay, so I'm sure you all have tales to tell. But the winner went to a school psychologist whose district paid $40,000 to get a motivational speaker in, who came in and used this metaphor of watering the bamboo or something, and then no one spoke of it again. Like, they have a dusty book that says water the bamboo. I mean, I'm sure it's a lovely book, but that's not really a great use of district funds, in my opinion. So I started creating professional developments that I would have wanted, which is, at various phases in your career, you go through these milestones of challenge that you've got to overcome. Otherwise, you risk leaving the profession or getting burnout. And so, if I may, I brought my time turner. Harry Potter fans, where are you at? Shout me on in the comments there. To turn back time with you, let's jump in that time machine about those various points in school psych's career, so you can, when you're listening, you can resonate with that. Like, oh yeah, that's me. That's where I'm at. So there's sort of 3 phases where I wish I could time travel back and give myself the advice that is in my new book right here. Okay. So I think 172,000 turns should do it. Back to when I first started out as a school psychologist. And it was really what I was conquering right then was overwhelm. And it was this huge learning curve. And it was feeling like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't organized enough. I was just like one Excel spreadsheet away from success, right? Like I just felt like organization was the key. And really what I was doing there was I was falling into the first burnout trap, which, visual aid, is falling into the paperwork and report writing trap. And it comes when you don't have a system to automate your reports and eliminate the nonsense, right? So in my first book, I do have forms. I'm like, let's not reinvent the wheel, y'all. Here's a form for the things you need. And so, we got a Ravenclaw in the house, nice. And so what I really found, though, in researching productivity is that all the time management hacks in the world will not save you unless you tackle your mindset first. And I'll give you a concrete example. So I want you to think about what you tell yourself when you have a backlog, 20 assessments. And, right now during this time period when, we're in the coronavirus and we couldn't see kids in the spring, a lot of us have a lot of backlog, right? What are you telling yourself, right? You're saying, if I just get through these ones, then it'll get easier. And then the big lie all school psychologists tell themselves, which is it'll calm down next week, right? Or the next week will be a little bit lighter. No, it won't. I'm sorry, it won't. It's just not going to be, because we're school psychologists, and it will never be done because kids are never done. So it's a fallacy to think like, oh, well, I can rest when I'm done. So a little while ago, about 4 years ago, I started an online community for school psychologists, born out of this isolation and desire to have professional development, like with my peers. And I asked people, like, what are you thinking about when it comes to, productivity? And it was always about trying to find that Excel spreadsheet. Now, I'm not here to bag Excel spreadsheets. I love a good color coding system. I mean, you guys, if I panned over here, you'd be like, it's a beautiful mind of Post-its. I love organization, but organizational hacks alone are not enough. Okay, so let's use an example. So if you say, well, I can rest when I'm done. Has anyone said something so long? I'm like, once I finish this report, then I can relax with Netflix or whatever. Okay, what if you told yourself something a little different? What if you told yourself a rested mind is more productive? Because the neuroscience shows when you take breaks, when you don't work to that point of exhaustion, when you sleep, when you actually take mindful moments in the day, you're 33% more efficient. So a rested mind is more productive. So it's an example of, if you kept saying that original mindset, which is like, I'll rest when I'm done, you're just going to keep running on that hamster wheel and be like Secret Life of Pets 2, where the hamster's like, I run and I get nowhere, right? And you're just going to keep running and writing reports unless you also conquer your mindset. So there's a number of mindset shifts in the book that I have the counterpart to that will help you become less burnt out, because yeah, you'll never be done. So that's my first pro tip, is to check your mindset first, and then the hack can come from there. And I'm gonna let you respond to that, and then I'm gonna give you a hack anyway, because I love I love some hacks anyway.
Yeah, so do I. I wanted to connect with that, you know, like it's so, I don't know, kind of easy to say to other people, to, you know, to teachers or to your colleagues, that you must take care of yourself. You must put on your own oxygen mask first. But it is so hard to apply to yourself when everything feels so, you know, time sensitive and critical. And yeah, it's just that mindset shift. It's so simple, but it's so hard. And I don't know if you have a hack for that, to hack your mindset a little bit more easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, when I get into a space of overworking or feeling like my to-do list is growing and growing, and I need to just keep, you know, nose to the grindstone, and it is, a rested mind is more productive. And you know, I know that it is, doctors make the worst patients. School psychologists sometimes, no offense y'all out there, but you make the worst patients when it comes to self-care. Like, I think that another kind of mind hack, if you will, that I use all the time, it kind of weaves into pillar number 4 around self-care, but I'll give it now. Why not? They all kind of work together. They're like gears in a system kind of thing, which is to ask yourself, what advice would you give a bestie school psych friend? So if you're looking at that work bag on Friday night and you're like, I really want to just rest and relax this weekend, but I've got deadlines and I've got things to do and I want to get caught up and I want to feel like accomplished and done, ask yourself, just take a mindful moment and be like, what would I advise Rachel to do in this moment? What about, girl, take that home and let it sit at the base of your staircase and haunt you all weekend as you don't do it and then feel bad about it. Or then you do it and you neglect your kids and then feel bad about that, right? No, I would never tell her to do that. I would tell her a rested mind is more productive, and you'll feel refreshed on Monday if you leave that bag there. And this is something that's super, super hard for newbies. Super, super hard, because there's this fear of getting fired. Hey, there's a shortage, you're fine. But you know, there is this fear that you're not doing enough or you're going to get in trouble. And I want to just tell you a quick story that, like, mind blown. My first year, I was working in San Francisco Unified, which every single person at Berkeley, my professors and advisors, like, no, don't go there first. That is a huge monster urban school district. I'm like, but I'm young and like passionate, so whatever, I can handle this. I'm organized, I'm efficient, I have executive functioning skills that won't quit. I got this. And so I went there and I was working so hard, and I had like 24 signed assessment plans that were all due that month. And so I just thought it was my fault, like I wasn't efficient enough. And so I finally was at this point where I was like breaking down because I was working every single weekend. By the way, time turner time. Could I turn myself back and go have like a kid-free brunch in the city? Oh my God, I so would right now. And rested mind is more productive would have been handy then. But I gave in, and I was like, with my pride, and I went to my supervisor and I was like, I don't know what to say. I'm doing my best, and I have too much. I can't. I feel like I need some help. And she's like, okay, give me 10. I'll give them to Janice. Janice only has 4 right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could just ask for help. Like, that's crazy. And so it goes back to what Rebecca said, which is like, we would advise other people to ask for help, but oh, we're the helper, so we don't have to. No, I couldn't believe it. And then there was a point in time when I had a few, and then I took some of Janice's, like, we're fine. So again, it's communicating. And I think that for newbies, a piece of advice is to communicate with data. Without data, you're just a person with an opinion about how hard you're working. If you just bring, like, here's 24 assessments, plans, it takes me 6 to 8 hours per kid, and then this amount of time to write it up, and I'm crunching the numbers, and I'm 3 days a week, because I was at that time too, writing my dissertation at the same time. And he's like, I just feel like it's mathematically impossible for me to stay in my timelines, and that's really important to me. So what can we do together? And you may be surprised. Your supervisor doesn't want you suffering behind the scenes. They don't want you burning out and leaving. Help is available at Hogwarts if you ask for it.
Yeah, and I think that that's the sign of a good supervisor that's willing to, because I can speak to having been, and that's kind of was my moment of frustration that turned into creativity that kind of birthed the podcast, where I was in this terrible district in Texas that was giving the things that I was just like, this seems impossible to, do within the time limits that I have, like the 30 counseling kids and this many evals at the same time. It's just too much. And unfortunately, the response that I got from leadership in that district was not like, hey, let's talk about it, let's work it out. But that was a very telling moment for me when they're like, well, kind of too bad. That was like a clue to me that, okay, this is not a place that I want to be in. There are some that aren't super helpful. But I think that, a good supervisor and people that understand our field, and especially if you're supervised by other school psychologists, I think that that was not the case where I was at the time. So I don't think she understood where I was. Yeah. But
and you've actually, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love what you're talking about as far as like thinking, how would you handle this, or what would you recommend to somebody with this problem? And I have to stop myself when I'm dealing with my own children sometimes, like they're running around and I'm like like we're in a pandemic and my son has a terrible habit of like chewing on his fingers all the time. So I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to get germs. They're going to go in his mouth. It's bad news. Like we need to break this habit. And so I find myself like, keep your hands out of your mouth, keep your hands out of my mouth. And it's not working, obviously. And I had to take a step back and think, like, what would I recommend, like, to a teacher that I want to, I wouldn't be just keep nagging on the kid. It would be, let's talk about reinforcement. Let's talk about behaviors or response costs or replacement things and stuff like that. And that was like a light bulb on my, that went on for me that, okay, I need to not think like the parent that's overwhelmed. I need to think like, how would I help this person normally, in the schools? And so I think that that's a great message too, to slow down and remember that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think that
not being isolated, right? Like when I have something that I don't know how to address either with my own children or at work, it's so nice to be able to, message Eric and Rachel and run it by them, because sometimes you can't see what's right in front of your face. So those two, I think, are super important and go together.
Yeah, Rachel, I want to just piggyback on, because I'm a mom as well. I have 2 elementary kiddos and I'm doing distance learning with them. And my parenting courses were born out of this crisis. And I find myself being like, wait, what would I advise myself to do? Okay, I would relax my standards to a level appropriate for a global pandemic, right? I would give myself grace, and I just add the words "in a global pandemic" to any criticism I have as a school psychologist or a mom, like, oh, my house looks like crap in a global pandemic, right? I didn't get through my inbox in a global pandemic. My kids didn't finish their math worksheet in a global pandemic. And it just softens my criticism. But it's also, if you can treat yourself like you would your own bestie, something about stepping outside of yourself. And then what you mentioned about overwhelm too is it's recognizing like you can't parent from or be a school psychologist from a place of chaos, right? And so it's a great commercial for self-care, right? And I'll talk about self-care in a minute, how I actually have this not so radical idea that self-care is not enough. And I have the antidote to what that is too. But I did promise a hack, and I really want to deliver on that promise. Okay, so like I mentioned, pillar 1 is system to automate and eliminate. So there's an adage in productivity research, which I just like geeked out on a couple of years ago. I was like, how can I be more productive and things like that. So in addition to the mindset shifts, there's an adage that says, solve a problem once, automate it forever. So for those of you who are seasoned school psychologists, you probably have great templates and you could fluff them up a little bit, but like, doesn't it make it a lot easier when you can just go to your template and like, oh, great. I mean, I've been around so long, I'm like, I need a child who, is suspected of having autism, but actually has anxiety, whose mom is divorced, who's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's like that kid. Like I can find those templates. But when you're new, you don't have those. So you want to, first off, like kind of cultivate really great templates and invest that time in that. But my hack is actually around email. So I don't know if you guys get any emails or compose any emails. Do you ever compose an email and it's like on autopilot because you say it so many times? I'm finished testing, Johnny, and I need the mask, right? Whatever. So I have had email templates before where I like cut and paste from notes or whatever, but you can actually make your emails a signature. So you're like signed off, oh, Eric, school psychologist extraordinaire, or however it says. You can actually make I have 20 email signatures. And one of them says, I finished testing male. I finished testing female. I need the Basque teacher male. I need the Basque teacher female. And so you go to your inbox, and when you compose the message, you pull down that signature. Boom. I finished testing Johnny. Here's a personal anecdote. I need the Basque. Signed, Rebecca. And you can create these email templates that will save you so much time. So next time you find yourself writing an email that's used right all the time, and it could be like, we're not testing right now because of COVID precautions or whatever. You'll have to change that one a couple times. But it's so much faster to just drop down and grab that email. It's available. You can do it in Mac. You can do it in Google. Just make a new email template. So there's your hack. I promised.
That is an awesome one. And you know what? I tend to have email templates for like these very rare things, like when the parent writes to me because the family pet died. I have that one. Like I have those, but they're, not the everyday ones. It's genius. I think I love that. And I wonder if now is a good time to do our first giveaway. What do you think, Rebecca?
I do think it's a great time. And I also want to shout out Estella in the chat. She's a member of the Thriving School Psychologist. She's one of the OG original Thriving School Psych members, and she's shouting out the email hack. So we have both geeked out on that together for sure. So yay. All right. So you're probably wondering what you get as a prize. And I don't know. Can't think of anything except for my new book that just dropped today. I want to be like the Oprah of school psychology. Yeah, get a book. And yeah, get a book. Look under your chair. There's a book. Okay, so first one, it's a very highly scientific process that we discussed prior to being live. So go ahead, whoever is going to be in charge of that.
I thought you had volunteered to be in charge of that.
I am in charge of that. Okay, here's my highly scientific process. I'm going to close my eyeballs and point to the chat. And whoever's name I point to wins the book. Okay. Angie C. Is that pronounced right?
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So Angie, if you don't mind, if you're on either of the Facebook pages or on Twitter, send us a message with your email and we will get it to Rebecca so you can get your prize. Congratulations.
Yay, dopamine hit. Yes, keep going.
This might be a good time to take a question from Angie. So how can you tell which school districts and areas are more prone to burnout for school psychs? Any thoughts on that?
Great question. I think it all happens in the interview process. So when you are sitting down for the interview, people always forget that they're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. So you can ask them, what supports do you have for new school psychologists? And if they're like, oh, you can kind of talk to whoever when you need to, or like we have a mentoring program in place in which you're matched with a veteran school psychologist to walk the ropes with you, right? And you can even straight up ask, like, what are your caseload sizes? How many assessments are school psychologists expected to do in a month? And kind of gauge the numbers. Because really, and I'm always a big fan of, and this is a very scientific thing, spidey sense. If you get a spidey sense that they're like, not responsive to those questions, or they're like, oh, I don't know, or, oh, it depends. And like, they're like cagey about it. Or if they're like, we recognize we are, understaffed. So there are a lot of assessments. However, we, are trying to get more people or whatever, you can learn about that. I don't know if there would be data on like turnover rates, but if you go to forums and they're always advertising the same school district, maybe that's a sign that there's a high turnover rate. You can ask, like, how long have your school psychologists been on your, how long do they stay? Those kinds of questions, I think, are really helpful to give right away. And you could be really honest, like, look, I'm interested in doing more than just testing. What opportunities do you have in your district for that? If they're like, well, there's not really any, then, or they're like, oh, you can do that on your extra time if you have time, that's cool. Then that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah, those are good points. Also, we had another question from Caitlin for new school psychs. How do you estimate what is an average caseload for the area you're applying to? That's a good question.
Right. So the average caseload is really tricky to pin down sometimes. And I've asked school psychologists in my forums and things like, how many do you tend to do a year? And it ranges from like, 10 to 150. I mean, really, there's a huge, huge range. So again, that's something you are going to want to probably ask other school psychologists in the district if you have any insider information about what is the average caseload. I know when I worked in Oakland, there was a formula for it, like this amount of percentage of time you were expected to do this amount of evaluations, and it was all and if you're in a higher needs school, then it's less. So, you can ask, how are school psychologists assigned? That's a kind of a question that can kind of get around the block to it, which is like, oh, we assign school psychologists to, if they're more of a high needs school, then we only give you one. Or we give you, a full high school, but you have another person there. You can ask them how many there are. The average is tough to pin down, though.
Yeah, I've found that I'm most comfortable, with two schools, whether and really how many evals kind of depends on what the other responsibilities and the other duties are. Because, 40 evals with, a decent counseling caseload isn't, might be doable, but, you might be able to do more if you don't have the counseling caseload, that type of thing. But I always felt like two schools was like where I was most comfortable, because I didn't want to spend like 5 days a week in one school. It was like too much. I'm tired of the nonsense that happens to be going on in this building at this time. And I need a break to go to my other school. But, and I've worked with kind of really variable, like you said, I've worked in districts where I do like 30 evals in a year, and I've done over 100, which is rough.
Yeah. And it all depends. Like, I think that's a really good point, Rachel. And it kind of folds into my next burnout trap, which is, I always felt like, well, maybe this other district is better. And I always felt like the grass is greener on the other side of the Oakland Bay Bridge, or the grass is greener in this. And I hate to burst your bubble, but like every district kind of has its own flavor of dysfunction. I know that sounds cynical, but like, it's just really what your level of tolerance is for that particular flavor. The grass isn't always greener. It's a different shade of green. So in one of my school districts, I was a testing machine. That's all I did. And it was just like test, IEP, repeat. And I didn't like that because I love counseling. And then in another district, it was, pretty low on the testing, but the counseling need was so high. And I had a lot of big vicarious trauma because I was like heart-wrenching day in and day out. And then in another one, it was none of those things, but there was also parents who were like, had a red pen and they're advocate, and they're like, why didn't you give the C-top? And I'm like, how do you know about the C-top? Like, just like, criticism and fine lines everywhere. So what are you able to tolerate? Earlier in my career, I would not have been able to tolerate that level of scrutiny, but later in my career, I could. And, earlier in my career, I probably, wasn't really ready for a very high needs counseling load where there was trauma and crisis every single day because I was brand new. So it's really the flavor of dysfunction that you're most well suited to be in. I'm not saying don't change districts, but I'm just saying that there are cases in which, you can work within the district you're in to make systematic changes, which goes to the second point, which is feeling trapped in a testing only role. This one is actually very common to many school psychologists. I love assessment. I love geeking out on like the puzzle pieces and like the whisk. I love it all, but it's not the only thing I want to do. Right. And so when we are school psychologists in these systems, we can feel like we've been put in a testing only cage, like someone put us in there. Your role is testing, you stay in there. And then you feel trapped and resentful and you're looking at the door and like, why won't anyone let me out? Right. I can do so much more. And I discovered in my first 8 or so years that actually I was focusing so much on organization, I was missing the bigger picture. I was focusing on putting out every single little fire. I wasn't looking at the wiring to see why the heck everything was on fire, right? So this is the pillar number 2, Thriving School Psychologists. There we go. Spend time looking at the wiring, not just putting out fires. And any good school psychologist knows, like, yes, tier 1, tier 2, all that stuff. But if you want to think about it this way, here's another little pro tip, is that when you think about where you're time spent is not really giving a great return on your investment, it's when you have do not qualify students. I'm not saying that it's inappropriate referrals because the kid needs help and everyone wants to uncover that. But for instance, at one of my schools, every child in the 8th grade somehow was suspected of having ADHD in one classroom. And statistically, it would have been impossible for every child in that classroom to have ADHD, but that was what I was getting, referral after referral after referral. And guess what I was discovering at the end of that referral? It was trauma. There was a trauma, and also the kids never been taught executive functioning skills. And there was also a situational factor where it was 8th graders. It was always 8th graders. All 8th graders got referred for ADHD evaluation. You could set your watch to it every March because they were going to be retained if they didn't pass portfolio. And they didn't do portfolio because they had trauma and executive functioning lagging skills. So I was like, can we just stop? Like, and I had great rapport with my principal and my team. And again, that's really important when you pick a district, if you feel like you vibe with your principal and they get that your special ed's not the only game in town and they are in alliance with you on that. And I was like, let's just stop. Like, we're just stopping and we're going to peel back and we're going to be strategic. What can we do to give these kids executive functioning skills starting in August, September? How can we get them trauma-informed care early? And so we, with $0, with a budget of no dollars, we put in together an executive functioning coaching program. I recruited interns from my alma mater, Berkeley, who were just chomping at the bit to like get some experience. And they came in and were individual executive functioning coaches for some of the students, and then also class-wide lessons. And guess what? My referrals went down and I had so much more time to go into the classroom and teach executive functioning skills, which got me out of my testing only cage, right? So again, we can't be focusing on the bars. Like I'm focusing on like, oh, I'm trapped, there's too many assessments, ugh. No, there's a space in between the bars. And sometimes you can literally walk through it and be like, I'm just gonna do an executive functioning thing. And that's what I did, and it worked. And it was a synergistic effect of my do not qualify referrals went down. And my engagement in things beyond testing went up. So there's probably a passion project inside you right now. You're like, oh my gosh, if I could just, work on phonics with little ones, and get a program that then, wouldn't get every 3rd grader referred to me. I know there's a passion project inside you and you feel trapped. If you've been in the field long enough, if you're young in the field or new in the field, you'll feel trapped because you don't feel organized enough to get time to do it. And then if you've been in here a while, you think this is my prescribed role, but it doesn't have to be. And that's my favorite part. A shameless plug alert of the book is that there's stories in here of school psychologists who, just like you, felt like trapped. Like my districts, there's no way I'm going to move the needle. I'm being like more of a prevention and intervention specialist. I'm just going to be a tester. And they surprised themselves. They're like, wow, one of my greatest success stories is a woman called Jennifer who thankfully I got to meet at NASP in person before all this went down, who did that. She did just that. She's doing 100% SEL now, no testing, just like a try here and there. And she was 25 or so evals a year. And it was being strategic and thinking what's in between those bars, how can I walk through those? And someone asked a question, I do want to, was it hard to get the teachers on board? No. They were like, a body in my classroom, yay! You're going to help Johnny? Awesome! I don't know why I always use Johnny. Like, Johnny's always like this school psychologist, industry standard kid who needs a lot of help in all areas. But again, they were happy because often people, and I always say this for newbies, and when you're in, we call them SST meetings out here, pre-referral intervention teams, whatever you call them. With every no, there should be a yes. Like, no, we're not going to assess right now, but yes, I'll come in and observe, or yes, I'll come in and do a little one-on-one with him and see where the lagging skills are and see what we can't figure out from. The teachers just, they want help. Sometimes they don't want special education, but they see that's the only game in town. And then PS, it takes 3 months to get that sometimes. And sometimes they don't even qualify. And so then it's frustrating for the teacher as well. So intervene early and often is something we always know as school psychologists, but you can do it with data. You can straight up, I have tools in my program where we straight up look at the data and like, where are all my do not qualifies coming from and what can we strategically put in place before that? And most teachers were on board. They're like, yeah, we'll take the help. Sign me up.
Yeah, teachers especially, I find, like psychs that are willing to step into the classroom and model the thing, or, show a lesson, do a lesson, be involved, not just like send the email, like do this and do this type of scenario.
And there's so much, I think, research now in terms of supporting tier 1 and interventions ahead of time, right? Pre-referral interventions. And, you know, as districts, we don't always turn that ship around, right? As you said, Rebecca, you know, we don't always move the needle, right? It takes all these baby steps, but one teacher at a time, one classroom at a time, supporting the intervention that the students need. That's what teachers want. That's what kids need. And it really enhances our role and our abilities to be more successful, right? Rather than just testing and finding out they don't qualify, which is
and then when you help
frustrating
one
all
teacher
around,
understand
right?
Poor Johnny and his ADHD symptoms, and you equip and model for them how to work with that outside of special education, you've equipped her or him to work with any other Johnny who's similar, who comes in their classroom. And so there's a ripple effect. And so we think like, well, I'm just doing this one thing, I'm just walk through the bars this one time. That one time could be a catalyst for the teacher having a better understanding. And that's why we love being consultants, right? We can help shift people's mindsets so that they can be more preventive and build up their skill set. Because teachers do well when they can, kids do well when they can. And if you can be, I always feel like school psychologists are like the linchpin in all of the parties who are involved with a child. And you can really have a great ripple effect, I think.
For sure. And I am excited to say we're going to do another giveaway. So please comment away and we'll use our very scientific method. Again, just shout out what's on your mind and we'll get lots of comments to choose
You
from.
have exactly 5 seconds before I do my very, I'm trying to think of the name. One of my daughter's teachers uses this reinforcement wheel in her, you know, like the old popsicle sticks. There is a website, and I'm not coming up with it right now, where you can put the kids' names in and like, and then you like, it stops on it and it goes, yay, it's, you know, Karen or whatever. I wish I had that and I was fancy enough to use it.
Yes.
It's called like Wheel of Names. I think that's it. I think it's Wheel of Names, but it's really fun. I use it in my Thriving School Psych Collective when I give out swag and prizes because I can type their name in and then it's just reinforcing to have little, you know, digital confetti flying everywhere. Okay, so we're going to pretend we have digital confetti. Here we go. We have Miss Marie Morales.
Awesome.
Confetti! All right, you private message these folks and they'll get you your very cool prize. Yay! Okay, so I do want to transition to the other 2 burnout traps because they're also really, really important, particularly as we think about National School Psychologist Week, heretofore known as NSOHA. No, wait, how do you say it? I can't say it. I always love SPA, like School Psychologist Awareness, always in my heart, particularly because you can, you know, do your best crow impersonation during a School Psychologist Awareness Week of SPA, right? I'm always going to do it. In fact, I just got a tweet from the National Executive Director of NASP authorizing me that I can still do the SPA crowing. So it's on. This is my last year. I'm going to live it up. But this is super critical. So the theme this year is power of possibility. So I want to ask you a real question. I want you to think about it in your brain. When you read the theme for National School Psychologist Week, power of possibility, did you think of your kids, your students first? I did. I was like, oh yeah, they have so much possibility and I love them so much. I want to invite you to think about your possibility because when you're trapped in a testing only cage or when you're feeling overwhelmed and burning yourself out writing reports on the weekends, when you're feeling isolated and lonely or you know that you're not living up to your full school psych potential, this is about you too. So the last 2 burnout traps are really about school psychologists in particular. The third one, as I mentioned earlier, is burnout trap 3 is being alone on an island of suffering. And I think we are particularly prone to that because we know, and this is a, I won't sing it, but there ain't no party like a school psych party. Anyone who's been to NASP knows that do you guys just feel like that jazzed energy after NASP or after these podcasts or after like, you know, having in the olden days when we could have coffee with a colleague, a school psychologist, like you just feel seen, you feel heard, you feel got. And that's something that's really lacking in our field. Thanks to the power of the World Wide Web, we're able to do these connections. So hats off to you for being here as well. So I want to invite you to think about some strategic planning around how you can connect with other school psychologists, because really you have to be strategic, and here's why. So, there's online spaces for everyone, and there's some that are a little bit more supportive than others, and there's some that you just want to check yourself, check your energy. After you go on to a particular school psych forum, or after you watch a podcast, or after you connect with a school psychologist colleague, do you feel better? Do you feel supported, empowered, nourished, and hopeful? Do you feel embarrassed or anxious or worried or annoyed? Listen to your own energy. Because, and this is one of the chapters in my book is called, it's called Find Your Marigolds. And it's based on a metaphor about, I didn't know this about marigolds, but apparently expert gardeners know that if you plant marigolds next to other plants, the other plants thrive. It wards off all the toxic animals and all the toxic bugs and things like that. And I want you to think about who are your school psych marigolds, who, when you're around them, you feel like you can thrive and they get you, and you can, be yourself and be okay not being okay, and like not feel embarrassed when you're like, I'm having a hard time, right? Gardeners also know, apparently, that when you plant things near walnut trees, walnuts, I didn't know this, fun fact, emit a toxic chemical that kills everything around it. And there are school psychologist friends who've been around a while who emit that toxic energy. Now, no one's always a marigold or always a walnut, but you have to protect yourself. You have to surround yourself with marigolds and put on your psychological hazmat suit when it comes to people who have a more burnout energy. And that can be teachers, that can be your principal, your direct supervisor could be having a walnutty energy kind of thing. And so stack the deck. The magic number is 2. The research shows that you only need 2 colleagues at work who are marigolds to be protected against stress and burnout. Look, there's 3 right here. Y'all are sorted. But at your school, it doesn't have to be a school psychologist. Now, while there is no party like a school psych party, you can also have adjacent marigolds as well. So I invite you to think about who can I connect with online, who are inspirational and make me feel uplifted, and who can I, in my school site, maybe not a school psychologist, kind of surround myself with that positive energy. Because really, that's one of the hardest things, is feeling like no one gets me. Like in my own family, God love them, they were like, at Thanksgiving dinner just not 2 years ago, like, so how is it being a school guidance counselor? I'm like, oh my God, it's a totally different job. Why does no one get this? So surround yourself with other school psychologists who you feel comfortable and cozy with, and then also plant your garden of marigolds in your life as well. Oh, I'm loving all this shouting out to you guys. Got some marigolds up in here, and I can't take full credit for that beautiful metaphor. It came from Jennifer Gonzalez. Do y'all know Cult of Pedagogy? She's like a marigold for teachers. She just has like these great practical advice things. And I'm not a teacher, but I like watch and listen to all her podcasts because I learn a lot that I can use in consultation. So there's another one for her, Cult of Pedagogy, which is kind of a fun name. But she's the one who originally thought about that for new teachers. And I was like, oh my God, school psychologists need that too.
I love her podcast as well. And I think she has a Facebook page, and she's on all kinds of social media. So that's a great place for inspiration.
So
really all the comments.
I'm feeling
all
some
the
like virtual marigold
really
energy, like deep marigold energy up in here. I love it. So I want to I know we're running up on time, and I could just geek out all day long, but I'm sure that people have things to do. Okay. But I wanted to share the last pillar and the last burnout trap. And really, it's the most important one, but it may become more important in your life right now during COVID. And it's, like I said, all these 4 pillars kind of work together like gears in a system, or if you want to mix metaphors, legs of a table. Like if you're super organized and you're doing a lot of stuff and you have friends, but you are completely burnt out and aren't taking care of yourself, then it's not going to work. It's going to topple. So at various points in your career, you don't need a time turner. You can just read the book and figure out which one do I need to lean on more. Number 4, drowning in the quicksand of overworking. And then I added and negativity. So this is a sneaky one. And I want to share a personal story. This is really sneaky for me. So I remember starting out as a school psychologist in San Francisco, and I was at staff meetings and it felt like a walnut grove. I'm like, what is wrong with these people? Like, they're so grouchy. These school psychologists are like negative and cynical. And now I recognize that as burnout. But before I was like, oh gosh, what's wrong with their personality, right? That fundamental attribution error where, in ourselves, it's situational and everyone else, it's personality, right? When you cut someone off and I like, oh, it's because I in my blind spot. But if someone else cuts you off, well, they're a jerk, right? So I was at these meetings being like, why are they so, jerky? And then I actually ended up being a walnut. I was at my own staff meetings being like the most walnutty of walnuts. I didn't even recognize myself. And I pride myself on being like using sense of humor and like being fun and engaging and optimistic. And I'm one of those people who's like, oh my gosh, the barn burnt down. I can see the moon. Yay. Like, I'm Pinkie Pie of school psychology. I'm like, I'm falling down a waterfall. Yay. Like, I'm really a positive person, but it really was like quicksand. It was like a little tiny, I was okay. And then like a little tiny like rock of like in my backpack every single day. And I just kept sinking and sinking and sinking. And I would work harder and harder to get out. And you know about quicksand. I don't know if you know about quicksand. The harder you struggle, the more you get stuck. And so I was just struggling and sinking, and then I just got negative, and I didn't even recognize myself. And so the antidote is my me search that I talked about at the beginning, at the top of the hour, about what does it take to what is the science of burnout? What is the science of happiness? So pillar 4 is practicing self-care and knowing the science of burnout and science of happiness. I love the positive psychology. You guys had someone on last week who was really great around positive psychology. It's not about being Pinkie Pie all the time. For those moms out there who've seen My Little Pony, I'm talking about. Everyone else like, what's this lady talking about? She's like perpetually optimistic, like inappropriately. So like kind of toxic positivity kind of character. So it's not about being happy all the time. It's being able to cope with stressful feelings. And so I'm here to tell you, and here is my truth bomb I'm dropping on you, is that self-care is not enough. There is no bubble bath in the world relaxing enough to escape the prison of beating yourself up for not being good enough, not finishing enough, not getting through your to-do list, not, serving that kid in the way you thought you were going to serve them. If you're beating yourself up every day, that's not self-care. You did a self-care behavior, you took the bubble bath, right? But you want to build a life that you don't want to escape from during self-care Sunday. And so this book is really about those 4 steps, how to get there, how to get to that point of not just self-care, which is great, I love it, but also self-compassion, which is that treating yourself like you would a best school psych friend. Because I remember when I was in San Francisco, I had a Greyhound dog. I'm embarrassed to say, but I'll say it anyway. His name was Pointy, and I named him that. But anyway, Pointy and I would take afternoon walks for self-care. This is when I was 3 days a week and I had about 100 evaluations a year, and I was writing my dissertation, and I was doing all these counseling groups because I was new and excited, and I formed a hip hop dance group at lunch and like anything I could get my hands on because I was like so excited to be a school psychologist. And I would go around this beautiful part of the marina of San Francisco with my dog and ruminate on what I didn't get to. So I was doing self-care, but I was not doing self-compassion. And that's the difference. Kristen Neff is wonderful. She talks about this. Self-care is done sort of off the job, and self-compassion is done on the job where the struggles are really happening in that moment. You can't go to an IEP meeting and be like, that was really stressful. I'm going to go take a bubble bath. Excuse me. Like, you have to stop and be like, what are the 3 steps? Okay, I'm in a moment of suffering. Everyone is in this moment of suffering at some point. And what would I tell Rebecca or Rachel or Eric to do? I would say, don't beat yourself up for not being psychic about what the advocate wanted from you that you didn't know that she wanted from you, right? Give yourself the same grace you give a best friend. That's a great, if you take nothing from this, take that. Treat yourself like your own school psych bestie.
So good.
That's so important. Yeah. And just, I loved your in a pandemic comment too, because even more so in a pandemic, we need to be demonstrating grace to each other, but to ourselves too. So yeah, great advice.
All right, I think we're close to wrapping up. So if anybody has kind of some last minute questions or comments, feel free to do. I know the chat box is going on right now. People are
and we have another prize, and then
yes,
we have a grand prize.
Yes. Oh, another prize and a grand prize. Okay.
Prize and a grand prize.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do the prize first and then the grand prize.
Yeah.
Highly scientific. The last book goes to Serena. Serena, did I say it right? I don't know.
Congratulations, Serena. Message us on Facebook or Twitter.
Yay. Okay, so I'll get you a copy of your book where you can read all about it. Okay, so there is a grand prize involved. And it's only, don't tell everyone, it's just for you guys here at the School Psych Podcast. So up until the end of School Psychologist Awareness Week, this is the contest, and it is a Mega Master Thriving Kit. Okay, so I'm gonna feel a little bit like School Psych QVC for just a hot second, but bear with me. So here is what is in this kit, and then I'll tell you how you can enter to win. The original School Psychologist Survival Guide with all the forms that Rebecca talked about. The new book to give your new school psych bestie, yourself. I did write this one for parents, but it's really great for consultation. The Everything Parents Guide for Executive Functioning Disorder. I like to geek out on executive functioning all day long. So if you have kiddos that you want to give parents advice, there are practical tools for that. A School Psychologist Gratitude Journal for all your hopes and dreams.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
is there
I'm
more?
not done yet. Oh, but wait, there's more. Your very own Thriving School Psychologist coffee mug that says, I never get invited to any meetings, said no school psychologist ever. Mm-hmm. And the fifth pillar, oh, I forgot, there's more. This poster, top 10 reasons to be a school psychologist. It was actually crowdsourced by all y'all on Facebook. I asked a couple School Psych Awareness Weeks ago, what do you love about being a school psychologist? And that's what came out of it. And then the fifth and sixth pillar of thriving. Who ready? Chocolate and coffee. This is my favorite coffee. It's made in Tahoe, up kind of close to where I'm at. It's called Drink Coffee, Do Stuff. So you can drink your coffee and then do your stuff, which is expanding your role beyond testing, which is getting organized and streamlining, connecting with other school psychologists, and building up your self-care. How do you win? I'm glad you asked. So anyway, oh God, we have to have fun, y'all. Seriously, there's been a lot of stress in the world right now. We got to let loose. So you can go, this is just for School Psych Podcast people. This is my high tech, thrivingschoolpsych.com/school psyched. The book is available on Amazon. And if you buy the book, it can be, it's on Kindle too. If you buy the book, go to the school, you can go to Amazon, just Google Thriving School Psychologist, go to Amazon, buy the book, copy your order number. If you pop it in to School Psyched, that URL, Thriving School Psych /School Psyched, you'll be entered to win the contest. You just pop in your email, your order number from buying the book, and you'll get the Mega Master prize pack, and I will announce it live on Friday the 13th. The last day of School Psychologist Awareness Week, SPA, whatever the new rebrand is, I'm still going to call it SPA. I can't stop myself. Serena, you're funny. I have missed my second calling as a stand-up. Oh, okay. I'll be at the Comedy Store no. Look, sense of humor is where it's at. You have to laugh or else you might just cry all the time. So yes, virtual hugs to all y'all too. And the book is full of like the same kind of me, like as I wrote it. It's just, we have to keep each other inspired and uplifted, and especially in these very crazy times. I do think, hold on, I know we're about to end, but I have to do a quick soapbox. I feel like COVID might be sort of a blessing for school psychologists in a very weird package, which is people can start to see us as doing things other than testing, because for a long time we weren't able to do testing, or we're not able to do it fully. We can streamline the report writing and do other things like virtual SEL, and then people can't unsee that. They can't unfeel how they felt when we pushed into their Zoom classroom or helped all these kids who needed help with primary needs, such as safety and belonging and food and these things. So it's an opportunity for people to see us as more than just testing machines, because I know all y'all are definitely more than that.
That is awesome. We have so many good comments, and I know you wanted to give away one other book, right? You're going to do the magic point in place.
Okay. Did we already give away one or no?
Did we get to 3?
We have one more?
The magic number was 3.
I think we did 2 so far.
Got 2 so far.
Like we did 3, but let's do.
We did 3.
Am I wrong? I'm sorry. Maybe I am not counting well.
Okay,
Sorry.
we do 4. Rebecca, you just won it. Woo! For my school psychologist, Rebecca friend. Sorry, Rachel, Eric. I'm so sorry that you're not in the Rebecca club right now. So that was a little Rebecca.
Thankfully, I can borrow it from her.
Yes, so that was a little Rebecca nepotism. Sorry.
Well, that was so much fun. I love all the comments. I love all the energy. I love all the prizes. And thank you so much for being here. Everything you said made so much sense. It's so, so important, especially now. And I know I'm going to take this, these hacks and these tips and this energy into my week. So I can't thank you enough for being here.
It was great to be here.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we head out, I wanted to see, when is our next one? Because I haven't posted it. I'm terrible.
The 15th.
The 15th.
It's Karen Gross speaking to us about trauma-informed work.
Yes. And then 12/6, Dr. Dawn Flanagan.
Yep.
So look forward to that, everybody. But thank you so much for joining us. That was awesome. I learned a lot. And I think that motivated us through these ridiculous times. So
yes.
Right? Yeah, I'm going to go write down in my gratitude journal that my kids did not bust in here. This is like huge, y'all. Like a little extra ice.
The internet worked.
The internet worked. I know. Well, with 2020 keeps on delivering. So I'm really going to start to focus on the positive. So thank you for having me. It's been an honor. This is my favorite podcast of all time. You guys are amazing. You're my marigolds. And I love that you guys had me on here. Have a great week, everyone.